I am.
Okay. So welcome everybody to our May 21st, 2020 electronic meeting of the Finance Committee. We are meeting electronically due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic in accordance with the Governor's News Emergency Order 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04. Please note that in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting. Instructions are provided on our agenda on the City of Concord's website at concordnh.legstar.com/calendar.aspx. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All the members of the Finance Committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting, and the public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through clicking on the following website, us02web.zoom.us/j84485685024. If any member of the public does not have the website access, they may dial the telephone number of 929-205-6099 and enter the webinar ID number 844-8568-5024. We will not be using the chat function in this Zoom for this meeting. Please note that testimony, we're not going to be accepting testimony tonight, so I will skip that. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-230-4619 or send an email to citycouncilmeeting@concordnh.gov. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn from the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Let's start by taking roll call attendance. Reminder, please just state where you are and who's with you. And if you have any questions or any trouble accessing the meeting, please call again 603-230-4619 or send an email again. That is citycouncilmeeting@concordnh.gov. Mr. Manager, do you want to call, or Ms. LeBron, do you want to call the roll? What do you want me to do?
I'd be glad to. Mayor Pro Tem Bouchard.
Here, no one else in the room.
Mayor Boulay.
Here at my office, and I am alone.
Councilor Champlin.
I am at my home and I am alone in this room.
Councilor Fennessy.
I am here and I'm alone by myself.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
I am here and I am in a room by myself.
Councilor Hatfield.
Here at home in a room by myself.
Councilor Quiche.
I'm here, home alone.
Councilor Kennison.
Councilor Kennison?
You're muted, Councilor Kennison.
Yeah.
I'm frozen.
Here in my home, no one else is here.
Councilor Kretovic.
Presently, I am by myself. Eventually, my husband or son may walk through. That's Jack and Bill.
Councilor Mattson.
I'm here. I'm alone in my room.
Councilor Nyan.
I am at home, present at home, and currently my wife and son are in the room.
Councilor Pierce.
Present and home alone.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Present and alone in this room.
Councilor Todd.
Here at home, no one in the room with me.
Councilor Werner. You're muted, Councilor.
I am here and alone.
That is everybody.
Great, good to see everyone tonight. So tonight, we have a fairly aggressive agenda. Tonight, we are going to be talking about general government, which is going to include the city manager's office, legal department, assessing, human resources, finance, information technology, city council, clerk's office, as well as general overhead. And when we conclude that, we will then be taking public safety, which is police and fire, and then we'll be talking about general services. So with that, does anybody have anything they want to share before we begin? Great. Mr. Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of City Council.
The first item on your agenda is item number 4, general government. So you want to go to that attachment in your system, and you want to be on page 55 would be where to start. So on page 55, City Manager's Office, budget to budget revenues are down $30,000. This is due to $30,000 supplemental appropriation revenue for education and training funding from FY19 surplus, which you approved. And also budget to budget expenses are down $27,000 due to the reduction in outside services from the education and training 2020 supplemental item. Going on to the next page, you want to be on page 59. And that is the legal department. Budget to budget revenues are up $1,900 due to a 2% increase in fees charged to other communities for prosecutorial services we perform. So as you know, the city provides those services for Bow, Dunbarton, and Loudon. The expenses budget to budget are up $51,400 or 3.9%. And that's due to wage and benefit increases that you've approved.
Mr. Manager, I'm gonna slow you down just a little bit.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions about the city manager's budget? Okay, does anybody have anything about the legal budget? I do actually. I don't want to really slow this down, but I do want to just ask a generalized question. When you put together, when the various departments put together their 2021 goals, it appears that some of them may have been completed prior to the pandemic. And so I'm trying to reconcile the service indicators, which is projected for next year, and some of the goals. And one of them, for instance, is, we're talking about the tax-based tax abatement cases. We only have 20. I'm wondering if you might reconsider that might be a little low. What do you anticipate for that potentially? And the second question is, when I look at the item number 4 under the goals, y'all talk about they'll continue to work with the Concord Circuit Court and the backlog that's occurred within the criminal and civil cases. And then I look at the civil and criminal cases. It seems like you're anticipating there's really no more than this year. So maybe just kind of maybe a quick update to A, what's going on with the prosecutor's office in terms of the caseloads, and number 2 is, what do you anticipate for abatement requests for next year? I can't hear you, Mr. Manager.
I'll bring the city attorney in a second, and the prosecutor is also on the line. We had looked at updating. You're right about when we put together many of the numbers. We had looked at they were just before or right during the COVID situation beginning. So we looked at changing those, but it's anybody's guess of whether or not the abatements will be 20 or 40 or 80. There's no, you could change the number to reflect the fact that things are going to change, but there's no way to estimate anything that's a reasonable number. So we thought it'd be more consistent just to leave it alone for this time. But if somebody would like to change that, there's no harm done there. In terms of caseloads and working through the prosecutor's office, why don't I have the city solicitor come on, and he can also talk with the city prosecutor, who's also again available. I'll allow Jim to talk. Yes. Okay, Jim, you're online. Could you field that question?
Sure. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, we did come up with these numbers, which you'll see are fairly consistent over the past few years. And I think the mayor's right. There could be an increase, and I expect there probably will be an increase for tax abatement cases in the next fiscal year. When I came onto the city back in 2009, coming in, I had approximately 82, I remember that number, of cases, the majority of which being assigned to me were abatement cases. And you might remember back in that time frame, we had an economic downturn. different than the one we have here now, but was very, it was a property-based economic downturn that we were experiencing. But so certainly, we could certainly increase that estimate. I think it would be, okay to do so. But I also understand what the manager's saying is that when we came out with these numbers, it's really pre-COVID, before we really appreciating the impact of this pandemic. Those are the numbers that we came up with. I have the city prosecutor here who can also respond to the COVID numbers. We did come up, you'll see that we addressed it in our goals. You saw that COVID was really taking off. And so we were able to anticipate some of the, and I think these goals could probably be enhanced more now based on the day-to-day learning and experience that we're going through right now. But she's here to give you an update as to what's going on right now with the circuit court and our cases, and give you, just a brief overview of how our attorneys are working with the court and the number of cases that we still have going on day to day. Here's Tracy Connolly, the city prosecutor.
Can everyone hear me okay?
We sure can. Thank you.
So right now, what we're finding, the court just sent out a new order today that they will remain closed except for emergencies until June 15th. However, we are doing hearings. So we have hearings on a daily basis. Any pleas are done telephonically. Bail hearings are done telephonically. We've had a couple competency hearings telephonically, which include witnesses. There's a learning curve to this. Everything's been done telephonically at this point. The court sent out its orders to how we are going to proceed with arraignments will no longer be scheduled. Instead, the defendant is being ordered to contact the prosecutor's office and speak to the prosecutor. Status hearings will be scheduled telephonically, where the prosecutors will be in the court, but will be calling the defendant on the phone. We have a lot of paperwork that is now on the prosecutor to file with the court. A lot more responsibilities will be falling on the prosecutor to reach out to defendants who are not represented. Even those that are represented will be filing the paperwork to the court by a certain date. They are talking about doing video trials shortly. They're working on WebEx, I think, right now, which is what the court is testing. The attorneys are at home calling defendants, defense attorneys, writing motions, having telephonic hearings, opening files. People are still being arrested. Cases are still coming over from all 4 police departments. We have pretty good techie amongst us who has really helped us set up how we can open files remotely and do more of this from our homes. Our 3 admin staff are in the office for the most part, which allows us to work remotely. They are able to scan files to us so that we don't have to make as many trips in, allowing them to work from the office. I'm still getting calls at all hours from all the police departments as they have questions and as needed. I have had contact with the court quite a bit this week, trying to figure out how we're going to make this work. Right now, as I stated, defendants are giving our phone number to call, and I am reaching out to all the defendants that I have a phone number to try to work cases out and get things moving.
Something else to note too is that while Tracy mentioned WebEx, and the circuit court is kind of lagging a little bit behind the Superior Court and the Supreme Court in that context, but we're able to hold virtual hearings at the Superior Court and the Supreme Court. The circuit court's still working to catch up with the other courts right now, and quite frankly with the federal court. So there is a backlog of those hearings where there's no trials going on, and so there's going to be some catch up as soon as that WebEx opens, and certainly at the June 15th date when that circuit court opens for what we anticipate more business. There's a building of a backlog of cases right now.
Thank you. Councilor Hatfield, you had a question?
I did. Thank you very much. On page 59, there's a really helpful breakdown labeled service indicators. And I was wondering if you had a breakdown by municipality for those cases so that we could see how many are in Concord versus the other municipalities. And if you have that, if you could provide it to us.
Do you mean like the Bow, Dunbar, and Loudon cases?
Exactly, yeah.
Thanks.
And then I have a follow-up.
Please.
So under revenue on that same page, so page 59, the last line under revenue, other government agencies, local, are those amounts only comprised of the contracts with the other municipalities that we serve?
Yes. Did you hear that? Yes.
Yes, I did. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I do have a question for the manager back on his budget, but I'll hold that until you're ready.
Okay, I'll just recognize Councilor Keach and come right back to you, okay? Councilor Keach?
Thank you, Honor. Attorney Connolly, I understand that statewide arrests have been significantly reduced. Has your office experienced a reduction in criminal cases referred to you by the departments they represent?
Yes.
And would you expect that trend to go forward, or is that just voodoo science guessing?
I don't expect it to go forward. I don't know how much it'll pick up. I do know the manner in which the police department is investigating cases. I'm not surprised it's gone down. So it's not surprising. I expect to see a pickup. How much, I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. I just had one last one. So I don't think I asked my question really well, but what I was trying to get at was, I think you're going to see an uptick in abatement cases, and I'm looking at the backlog. And ultimately, my question simply was this: do you have the resources right now to deal with what I think is coming your way?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that we do, and we'll definitely do whatever we have to do to manage the caseload that I agree with you. I anticipate is coming, and we'll be certain to represent the city with the resources that we have going forward. Like I said, we had that number of cases back in 2009, 2010, and it was an ominous task, but we got through it, and I anticipate that we'll work with the property owners here and do whatever it is that we need to do to get through this next stage.
Yeah, thanks. Councilor Hatfield, you want to take us back to the manager's budget?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm looking at page 55, and I just was wondering, Mr. Manager, are you concerned about cutting the education budget, or will you try to take advantage of free training opportunities like through the municipal association, for example?
I think it's a good question. That there's I think a lot of opportunities through webinars to take courses, and I'm noticing a lot of the organizations that I follow are starting to ramp up those types of opportunities for that. As we go, that's a great segue into, as you start looking at all the other departments, you're going to know there's where dollars are not necessary for important certifications or for, say, CLEs or something else along the line. All the training and the travel associated with that has been cut to try to achieve the budget savings that we needed. So I didn't think it was right to cut those dollars throughout those departments and not feel the same effect myself. So that's why. So it's a combination of both, but it makes sense I think there'll be plenty of opportunities, but I think we need to set an example for the rest of the city that if I'm going to do that to all the other departments, for the most part, I need to do it to myself.
Thank you.
You guys have any questions? Councilor Keach, did you have another question? Okay. No. You want to take us to a set? Mr. Manager, you want to take us to assessing now, please?
I will go to assessing, and then we'll stop after each department. Is that how you'd like to do it?
Just that way we can ask questions, and we may not, but just give an opportunity.
Sure. We want to be on page 62. And revenues budget to budget are up $52,100 or 6.9%. And this is due to the increase in the payments in lieu of taxes section, you'll see, and the addition of a payment in lieu of tax for the Concord Visiting Nurses Association. Expenses budget to budget are down $26,900 or 3.9%, and that's due to wage and benefit changes. Those went up, but the outside services is down $6,700 because we eliminated training and seminars. I don't answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question on assessment? So I don't want to slow this process down, trust me, but could you just keep a real simple answer? So when I look at the 21 goals, talks about completing the digital mapping with the GIS staff. And then I look at the 2020 goals and such, and it talks about finishing phase 5 for the maps. And then phase 4 has begun, or phase 6, excuse me. Could you translate that for the general public?
The end is in sight. So essentially what we're doing is if anybody remember, if in most communities have tax maps which are hand drawn. If you remember, several years ago, the city council decided to undertake a process at our recommendation to take a process of actually digitizing all those maps and for each single parcel of property in the city, and I'm thinking 15,000 pieces, and we're doing it in several sections. The idea was it would take a number of years to do it because you have to not only go out and map all that and check that all out, and it works with our GIS system, but you have to verify a lot of that. And there was no sense appropriating all the dollars at once to do that. So we've cut it into, I'm going to think, probably 7 or 8 different sections over the years and done piece by piece. So we're getting close to the end of doing that and finishing up the entire city. Once it's done, you'll have a fantastic base to build on into the future, but essentially we were starting from scratch.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions about assessment? Okay, that takes us to human resources.
So you want to be on page 64. And on page 64, you'll see that the revenues budget to budget are flat, and expenses budget to budget are down $8,500 or 1.5% due to the changes in, again, benefits and wages are up slightly, but the elimination of training and seminars.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on resources? Councilor Crederick.
Thank you, Your Honor. Not a question, but a comment. I just want to make sure that we commend Jennifer Johnston for her statewide leadership during the pandemic. We're both part of this statewide group for HR professionals, and I constantly see her on there leading the charge, helping some of our smaller businesses, smaller municipalities navigate through both the federal and the state responses to COVID-19. And it is so worthy to see her there and so respected in the HR community. It deserves recognition. So thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Appreciate you pointing that out. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Manager, take finance.
The next item is finance on page 67. You okay? The revenues budget to budget are up $275,300. That's 0.5%. Note that property tax revenue is up to $320,700 due to new properties, the additions and renovations that occurred throughout the city. We'll be watching the property tax collection rate very closely this year, and you'll be seeing, as I think Mr. LeBrun talked about earlier, we'll be bringing a request for authorization to issue tax anticipation notes in the event the collection rate turns out to be too low, so that we prepare to borrow funds for cash flow to meet the city's obligations. So we could potentially see that in future meetings. Motor vehicle registrations are down $82,000. And note, we are anticipating that this revenue line to finish in fiscal year 20, we anticipated it to be about $7.3 or $7.4 million. However, that is not going to happen. Very unlikely. We're now estimating at $7 million, and so you can see we've provided a $200,000 to $300,000 reduction in that going forward. Again, this is one of those things we're going to have to watch very closely. Investment income is down $310,000, I'm concerned that this amount may be wishful thinking, given the recent discussions with the Federal Reserve rates and the negative interest rates, potentially. The use of fund balance, you'll see $1.5 million request is new for fiscal year 21, even though we are showing a 1.1 million used in fiscal year 20. That amount is from the assigned fund balance for specific projects. Money you've set aside for different uses. Now that you've said, okay, those are coming up, we'll take the money out of those accounts and spend it. This is from the unassigned fund balance. In fiscal year 21, $1.5 million is an offset to the tax rate increase. So this is how we're able to do something, if you choose to do it, to be able to pass a budget without a tax rate increase, is really being able to use the unassigned fund balance. Expenses budget to budget are down $4,500 or 0.2%. Be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions with finance? Councilor Crederick.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, thank you for the detailed response. I know that several of us have been talking about goals, and the first goal on the list here is regards to that 98% financial or property tax collection. And when we're looking at unemployment at hovering near 17% now, it definitely raised a concern. I know that Mr. LeBrun mentioned it the other day that he was looking that it could be as low as 95% and that we'll do the best that we can. So I appreciate you being flexible and not having an understanding that there's a lot of economic indicators out there that may change these numbers and cause us to need to be more fluid in how we respond. So thank you.
Okay. Councilor Hatfield?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is, I notice under revenue that rooms and meals tax, you've budgeted for it to be consistent with this year. And I just wonder if you could briefly talk to your thinking about expectations for the coming year.
Sure, I'd be glad to respond to that. We've been trying to get information from the state, so we have a little bit of anecdotal information that there will not be a change in that, but we haven't gotten anything formal at this point. We look at the way the state budgets those dollars, and even though they have a formula that they use based on the rooms and meals that are coming in throughout the state, it's a line item in their regular budget. So right now we're getting indications that that number may not change for 2021, but we would expect that there would likely be a change in 2022, but let's deal with 2021 for now.
Thank you. And my second question is, in terms of property tax payments, is the city looking at ways to be able to work with property owners to try to help facilitate people being able to stay on track to the extent that they can through payment plans and things like that? And is the amount of interest that the city charges for late payments, is that under discussion, or are we thinking about sort of proactive ways that we might be able to help people stay on track or get back on track if they get behind?
So the first part of that is staying on track. We have on a regular basis, if you notice our tax collection rate, is very high, usually 98% or so when we get to the tax collection periods. When we get to the end of the fiscal years and in our budget report, in our audited statements, you'll notice that, other than the current year, most years are at 99%. So we work very closely with the taxpayers who are behind in their taxes to see what we can do to help them get ahead. We have our staff calling taxpayers, trying to work with them and doing that on a regular basis. So we will continue to do that. We know that will have to be upped a little bit this year because there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to have some difficulties. So we'll continue to work with folks as much as we can in order to get them back on track to the best of our ability. So we'll continue to work with them there. As far as the interest and penalties, that was one of the governor's executive orders that would allow municipalities to make a decision to waive delinquent property interest and penalty expenses. So that was provided to the City Council at its April meeting, and it was sent to Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee for discussion and recommendation. What we did is we were waiting for some answers that were to be coming back from the governor to New Hampshire Municipal Association. They had asked a whole list of questions, and the responses that we've received so far, and we have to get back with fiscal policy in order for them to make a recommendation. But the responses that we've received so far is that there were no responses from the governor's office other than, it's a local option. So the municipality can make a decision on how they want to proceed with that executive order.
Thank you.
Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is kind of following up on some of the questions that the mayor asked to the city manager. And my concern here is that with respect to the motor vehicle registrations, that we might be being a little too optimistic with this $7 million number. And I'm just kind of wondering where you came up with that number. What was the assumption based upon?
We had originally we were originally looking at fiscal year 2020 to end somewhere around 7.3, 7.4 million, which would have given us about a $300,000 or $400,000 increase this year. And typically next year we budget what we think we're going to end this year at, because year after year we've had a $300,000 or $400,000 increase in those registrations. As we kept going through our budget process, we started to see the effects of COVID-19. We made a change to that and brought it down to just about $7 million. Last year was budgeted at $7,090,000, something like that. So, we were looking at that and saying, well, we could budget a little bit lower, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, or we're really about $400,000, $300,000 to $400,000 less than what we were anticipating budgeting. Is that enough of a buffer for what we think is going to happen? I really don't know the exact answer. We're doing our best we can to try to be as conservative as possible without crying wolf. And so we're going to have to watch that very closely. I would anticipate that as we go through this year, fiscal year 2021, there's going to be a number of revenue lines that we're going to have to revisit. Some may be better. Some, certainly aren't going to be as good as what we're projecting. And we'll have to revisit some of these budget items as we go through the year.
Councilor Hatfield, did you have another question? Okay, thank you.
I don't. I'll put my hand down.
Just didn't want to miss anybody. Anybody else? So I'm going to ask a question, and Mr. LeBrun, if you could answer it. It really applies to human resources, finance, and IT, and that's the whole ERP process. You talk about in the human resources, the human capital, I believe it was. So we've spent a whole lot of money on ERP. It's taken time. We've had to put some pieces on hold because of what we're experiencing now. But could you give us a brief update, a very brief update of where we are and what we have left to do?
Certainly. So we went live on our financial side of our new software in August 1st of this past year. That included the full accounting package that we have. That included our miscellaneous billing, our revenue, and our purchasing. So those are some major pieces of our overall financial software. Those, we've had bugs that we're working on, and we continue to work through those. But overall, it's implemented very well, and a lot of people have put a lot of really good effort into making this work very well. We have been working on the payroll and human resources. It's called Human Capital Management. We had anticipated going live on July 1st of this year. We were pretty much on track as we were getting into that March time period. And when the COVID happened, we had to reprioritize our efforts with all the other things that we were doing. So we have now put that one a little bit on hold as far as the training sessions go, even though we're quite far along with the human resources and payroll piece of it. And we will, we're actually meeting tomorrow to discuss how we can identify what our new go live target date is going to be. So we're a good way along with the human capital management piece, which will provide us with really quite a lot of benefits as far as online services for all of our employees through the whole payroll process, and trying to make everything much more economical for all of our employees to use. The next section that we're going to be implementing after that is our utility billing section, and that will include all the water and wastewater funds, bringing those on. That's expected, right now it's expected to go live in a little over a year from now. That will likely be pushed back a little bit because we're pushing back the human capital management piece. So we're going to have to evaluate that and see when we go live with that. And then the last piece that will go live is our tax billing software, which that will go live typically the year after utility billing. So we can work a little bit tandem on those two, but we still have a long ways to go. And as you can imagine, each one of these software implementations takes an extreme amount of work. There's a lot of diligence by a lot of people that have to be used in order to make everything come out the way that we need it to. And folks have really done a great job in putting it all together.
Appreciate that update. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? Seeing none, Ms. Manager, can you take us through information technology, please?
Okay, so for information technology, you want to be on page 70. Expenses budget to budget are up $48,800 or 5%. This increase is due to wage and benefit changes and an increase in outside services. So I mentioned earlier to the question from Councilor Hatfield about tuition reimbursements and certification. So here's a case where because the technology is changing so fast and all the improvements we've had to make, and obviously we're applying more technology to more departments every single day because of the current pandemic, we need to make sure our folks are properly trained and getting the certifications that they need. So, and you might recall, with a lot of the certifications that are required for dealing with federal Department of Justice and all the security that goes on with the police department, there is a whole series of requirements that go on that you need to be up to speed. We need to be up to speed with, our staff does, to be able to access to a lot of the federal information. So that's why you see that number up. Glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? IT? Okay, Ms. Manager of the City Council, please.
So you want to be on page 73. Expenses budget to budget are down $1,200 or 2.9%, which is due to a reduction in the council orientation expenses. You only have to do that every other year. And also you'll notice on page 80 and 81 is the information, you've requested this in the past, shows all the city boards and commissions, the total of which now is 53, which is the same as last year. We're glad to answer any questions.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to City Clerk's office.
So the City Clerk's office is on page 83. Revenues budget to budget are up $4,200 or 4.7%. That's mainly due to increase in the school district payments. And expenses budget to budget are up $14,000 or 2.8%. This is due to annual wage and benefit increases. And you'll also see anytime you have elections or a number of elections, these numbers also go up because there's obviously officials to pay and other expenses that go along with it. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? I guess I have one, just because I want to hear Janice's voice. So I have received recently many questions regarding elections, and I feel confident that Ms. Bonfant will do what she always does, provide a clean, safe election. But obviously, there's a lot more challenges this year. And one of the goals I saw was the recruitment of election officials. And I just wanted to see if there was a very quick update. How are we doing with recruitment of those officials? Are we going to have a tough time? Are there particular wards we need help with? Just that's what I'm looking for.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, Janice is on now, and you're one of the first people in a long time I've heard miss her voice. So I'll let her go.
Good evening, Mayor Boulay and members of City Council. Tom, you as well. So for elected ward officials, we're in really good shape in the city. There's 5 elected ward officials in each ward, so a total of 50. I do have some concerns about some of them perhaps feeling uncomfortable being at the polls on election day. And I do think we'll have some difficulties recruiting ballot inspectors citywide. We do reach out on an election by election basis to the Democratic and Republican parties locally for assistance. We advertise on social media, which we've been extremely lucky recruiting people. In all likelihood, I'll be reaching out to all of you. I've reached out to some of you in the past. It's a little too soon, but I do think that we'll need help.
Thank you. Anybody has any questions for our Mr. Keach?
Thank you, Your Honor. City Clerk, with regard to absentee ballots, would you expect a surge of them this year? And if there are, do you have the resources to handle that in your office?
Great question. Thank you. There is a committee that has been established at state level on the 2020 elections coming up. And based on the discussions at those committee meetings, which truly is unknown, I do indeed think that there's going to be a surge in absentee ballots based on what we're hearing. We have requested within the budget funds to once again have temporary help come help us here in the clerk's office. Historically, that temporary help has helped us with backlog of election filing, other election related things. That help would in all likelihood be redirected to assist us with processing absentee ballots. If the surge in absentee ballots is as high as people think it may be, which is all unknown, it is extremely likely that we would need additional temporary staff and or need to cross-train city employees to help us during that crazy time.
Thank you.
Councilor Hawkins.
That was part of my question, so thank you, Councilor Keach. The other part, and I think the city clerk alluded to this, we don't have a lot of information about what elections will look like this fall. So I do think that we need to be thoughtful in the coming weeks as more information is available. I think the elections division is going to have a lot of flexibility. But one of the things I'd like to ask, depending on what the state does, are there things that we can do at the city level to help increase safety, security, the health of voters at the polls? So for example, there's been a conversation about absentee ballot requests online and the state creating something like that. If the state chooses not to, is that an option we have available? And if so, do we have any sense of what that cost may be?
So the process for residents to request absentee ballots is something that it's a law. The process is a law. People have certain ways to request absentee ballots. So if that process were to change, it would be direction coming from the state. We do have absentee ballot request forms online on our website. We email them out regularly. People can historically stop into our office to get them. Nowadays, if they call, we either run outside or email them directly. They can write us a note, drop it in the box. I mean, I think the process is working really well. I think my concern is going to be the volume, not necessarily the ability for residents to request one, because I think that's fairly easy, but just us processing the volume as timely as we have historically. But we will do whatever we have to do to get it done, just like all other departments in the city do to get their given tasks done.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pierce.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for the city clerk, On the goals and the budget, are you comfortable with the ward houses within the city? I know you and I have talked about Ward 2, but do you foresee any changes coming up in the next year or so, next fiscal year, on making any changes?
So I think that goes back to the direction we may receive from the state. I do have concerns about the layout of some of our current polling locations and in all likelihood, the inability we would have to keep people as far apart as we needed to. I do think in fairness to some of our polling locations, they may or may not be willing to let us use their polling locations this fall. I have been in touch with many of them, and they, like I, am waiting to see what the state says to determine if they wish to let us know that they don't want to use their polling location. If that is the case, the moderators and I will do a whole lot of research to find a potential other location. In all likelihood, I'd reach out to all of you and absolutely work with city administration as well.
Great, thank you.
I believe you said it. Just can you say it again? When do you anticipate to know those the results of whether they want to hold them in their facilities or not?
Some of the polling locations that I've talked to are waiting to see what the state says as far as requirements for polling locations this fall. If the requirements have changed or relaxed or amended at all, it may alleviate some of their fears. I do think, though, that one of them that we use locally is a nursing home, and I'm confident we may need to relocate that just for the safety of the residents there, regardless of what the state does.
Okay. I'll be with Mr. Manager. I'll be with you in 1 second. That's one of those things where I think all of us can be helpful, but the sooner we know, the more likely we're going to be successful in coming up with a safe alternative. So, and I know that's not on you. It's a lot of it's on the state, but I'll stop there.
I do hope to have those answers by early June, very early June.
Okay, great. Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem? You're on mute.
There
you go.
You muted me. Okay, sorry about that. Back to the nursing home, which is in Ward 9, there is actually no other, I don't think, polling place. There are no schools or churches. If we do have to move it, and I believe we found that state law requires us to have the polling place in the ward, do you think it'd be possible maybe we request a waiver from the governor?
That's why I was asking to know as soon as possible, because we may have to exercise that. Unless we're going to put the polling location at Arnie's Ice Cream and we can all have ice cream.
No, that's Ward 8.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We'd have to go across.
That would be fun.
Okay. Mr. Manager, you had a comment. I'll come right back to you, Council Mattson. Mr. Manager, do you have a comment?
Just real briefly, you'll remember the deputy city clerk position is vacant right now. That position is fully budgeted for because we need it, particularly with the elections coming up. We need it all the time. Very small office, so they're down staffed by 25%. The difficulty is hiring somebody who is going to be an integral part of the team going forward. In this situation, you really need to do that type of interview face to face. So the money's there to do it, but just another difficulty that the city clerk is dealing with is making sure we hire the right person coming in who can help us and train them up fast for the elections in September and November. So the money is there. You have the money in the budget to do that.
Okay, thank you. Council Mattson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is the, and I haven't thought, is the arena in Ward 8 or 9?
8.
It's an 8. It's at least in the, on your side of the street.
True.
Just if I can point out that historically, when we were in situations where we could not locate a polling location within a given ward, we have been given an exception from the state to use a polling location just outside of a given ward. So I think that if we do run into Havenwood not wishing to let us use their polling location for very valid reasons, I think we would be able to obtain that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, does anybody have any further questions for the city clerk? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Manager, if you could take us through general overhead, please.
So general overhead is on page 85. You'll see budget to budget revenues are down $252,200 or 5.8%. This is due to a reduction in $95,000 transfer in from the impact fee fund, which varies from year to year. $8,400 from the Sears Block TIF district, tax increment financing district. $56,500 from cable TV franchise fee. That's a continuation of the downward trend that people are seeing nationally. And $71,000 less from retiree health insurance. And this is from the New Hampshire retirement system and less from employees. On page 86, you need to go to 86 to see the expenses part of this. So while revenues are down 252,000, expenses are down 1.2 million, or 7.8%. There's a $1.3 million reduction in transfer out to trust. This is from the supplemental use of fund balance from the fiscal year 19 surplus. $16,800 proposed reduction to the golf fund, anticipating that revenues will pick up in fiscal year 21, since a lot of the outings have been moved from the spring to late summer and early fall, and hoping to get back to normal at some point. And a $41,800 reduction in the transfer out to the capital line. Under special programs, this section overall is down $57,100. You can see the detail on that on page 87. All the items remain funded at the same level as fiscal year 2020, except for the reduction of the Concord Community Television. This reduction reflects the reduced revenues from Comcast because those are tied through percentage. Under debt service is up $382,600. This is due to paying for the newly bonded projects. So the projects that you approved last year start making the bond payments, principal interest payments on this year. That's up. Under risk and insurance, retiree health insurance is up $38,900. And this is coupled with a reduction in the retiree health insurance revenue. Shows you a swing of about $110,000 in retiree health costs. Under comp adjustment, this line is down $249,000. That's part of the overall wage and benefit changes that I went over previously. And that's where we've allocated $300,000 attrition reduction to help balance the budget, and that's throughout all the departments in the city. Under street lighting, there's an increase of $8,000. And as the city knows, we've been working on an LED street light program for many years, and we have hopes that we'll see the implementation of this before the end of this calendar year. And once that project is implemented, I anticipate a savings in line, but we'll have to see what that's going to be based on the project to reduce energy charges going forward. I'll keep you updated with the progress of that project. Under the social service agencies, you'll see again on page 87, funding for all the agencies except the American Africans remains the same for fiscal year 2020. Funding for the new American Africans in the amount of $5,000 has been removed for your instructions last year. And that completes the general government section of the budget. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Just before we start, I just want to announce, although we're not voting on anything, I do have a conflict with the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire. Just want to let the record reflect that. Councilor Credit.
Same conflict, Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire as a board member. Thank you.
Councilor Chamberlain.
Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict in the dues for the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I'll recognize is Councilor Hatfield, please.
Thank you. A question about the impact fee. So on page 85, you noted that the impact fee transfer in what is zeroed out in 2021. I was wondering if you could talk about why.
Sure. The The city council over the years has slowly removed impact fee funds or charging impact fee funds in a lot of areas. So in this case, there's no projects related to having to transfer dollars in from the impact fee funds that would fall into this category. So there's less revenue coming in, but at the same time, there's the projects related to that, just less that have to be put towards that.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
So there could be impact fees, they just would not show up here. Is that correct?
We continue to collect impact fees. You don't anymore for the school districts. You used to collect them for both school districts. We don't anymore because they don't have projects that are eligible for that. The projects that they did, the last one for the Concord School District was the high school edition. That was over 20-something years ago. So we don't collect for that anymore. Merrimack Valley School District, you'll recall, they did improvements to both the high school, the middle school, and the new elementary school. Well, those were 20 years ago. So we've collected the dollars that finished all the payments on that. So you can't collect monies for those. So am I missing it? I'm going to ask Carlos if I'm missing anything. Carlos?
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. So we also don't collect, thanks to a vote from the city council dating back, I think, a couple of years now, for projects that are commercial and nonprofit in nature. So those impact fees are no longer assessed. So today, basically, the city is only assessing for residential projects.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I have one. Mr. Manager, last year, I think the council asked you to, well, let me start this way. So as you've pointed out, the Concord Community Television is funded by the franchise fee. Franchise fees continue to go down. We talked about this last year and how we can make up for it, which I think we made them whole last year after the surplus or so. But we really wanted to try to avoid this year after year after year coming back. And I think most people agree with me that there's a tremendous amount of value in the Concord Community Television, making sure that our city meetings get out there and education meetings, etc. Did we do anything to address this structural deficit that will probably be continuing?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I talked to Josh Hardy. I wouldn't be surprised if he's listening in. He's going to be online on the 4th when you have that discussion for the public testimony piece, and I see he is there. It is something that I think we need to solve. I think that Concord TV has done a fabulous job, and I think they're going to become more and more necessary as time goes on to be able to get the message out. They do a lot of good work with us in the social media, and our public information officer producing a lot of pieces that we put out there for folks. So I think it is incumbent upon us to come up with a decision, but there's no simple decision on this because the amount is going to continue to go down. So I think we could do a number of things. You could change the percentage as we go along, but that you're going to have to do that on a regular basis because I think based on what I'm seeing, the amount of people unplugging is going to continue and be able to use other technology. The other part of that is you could actually budget a specific dollar figure as part of the budget and get away from this percentage piece, which I think may work for them and may work for the city. It'll give us a much more reasonable number to anticipate on a regular basis. The problem is you're still going to have less revenue coming in from Comcast as time goes on. So you're going to have a reduced revenue source and you'll have an expense number that will continue to increase over time, but I think we can manage that. So I think that's a discussion that we want to have when we have the discussion.
Great, thank you, I appreciate you. But we definitely need to revisit that because as you pointed out, I think accurately, it's going to be something that becomes more and more important to the community as we're realizing now how dependent we are on technology. So does anybody else have any questions? Okay, I had one other. I was wondering if you could talk about, or maybe our human services directors could talk about in the social service agencies. We have basically given the same amount of money to the same people over and over and over for many years now. And one of the things that I've heard, and it's a concern I have, is that unlike Manchester, unlike Nashua, who see federal dollars automatically flowing through them because they're more greater than 50,000 people, we don't. We're not fortunate enough to have those automatic dollars coming our way. So when you look at the social service agency budget, these are Concord taxpayers' money that we are reallocating for these services that we think are of value in the community. I think we've done a good job. But my question to you is, when somebody recently I was talking today about how our shelters are being forced to decompress because of concerns with the virus, and hotels are closing and such, and we have an increased caseloads with our human services department. There just seems to be fewer and fewer options that the director has to place people. And my question is, when we contribute to, say, and I'll just pick one, pick McKenna House or whatever, and I could pick probably a couple, but McKenna House, we'll just use that as an example. Are we able to successfully place individuals who present themselves to us at our human services department at McKenna House? I mean, in other words, I want to be able to say to the community, are we getting the greatest benefit we can for the $31,000+ we contribute each year? That was a long question, but it's
so. Mr. LeBrun, could you bring Director M.S. Williams on? Karen, you're there you go.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Honorable Mayor and council members. So yes, Mayor, I have the same concerns and that we've also seen in the community. If I pick McKenna House, we have been able to make a few referrals there in the past year. There has been some decompression requirements for the past month and a half, which has been able to, we have not been able to place anybody there since COVID, and you are correct about the hotels and the difficulties that we've had due to the closing of the different hotels in Concord. So it's made our job quite difficult in the past, at least, especially in a month and a half.
But what about prior to that? Have you been able to place people there?
It has been,
or Friends program for that matter. I mean, I don't want to pick on any one particular.
It has been on a limited basis.
What does that mean?
So if I recall some of my numbers, and I believe we've been able to successfully refer clients to McKenna House, maybe 5 in the past year. And also for the Friends House has been very limited. I'm going to say 3 families, although I will say since the pandemic did start, we were able to more successfully place families there. But in the years prior, it has been a very limited number of individuals that we have been able to place directly to the shelters.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Councilor Rice-Hawkins, please.
Just to follow up on that, was that because of cap capacity at those shelters?
Yes, it is.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Williams, to follow up on Councilor Rice-Hawkins, was the fact that, for example, McKenna House is a dry shelter, and actually systemically doesn't take people dealing with substance abuse issues. Was that a factor at all?
Not necessarily on a referral basis, because if I can make a referral and the client decides not to go, that's an option that the client is making. But it's really more because of the lack of space and availability of those shelter spaces. It's nothing to do with the sobriety or if it was a dry shelter.
Super, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Councilor Chris, I think you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there other social service agencies within the city that we could think about supporting in place of those that we've done for a long term, and maybe make it a list of revolving rather than, a sizable amount of money every year. So that's really two questions. Are there, and should there be funding at the expense of perhaps one that we've been funding for a long time?
I guess the answer is we've tried this several different ways over time. There was a real change in the Great Recession back in 2008 where we had to make some tough decisions, and some people who had traditionally gotten money in the past no longer did. We have done all kinds of different things. We've used the application from the United Way when Mayor Hager, she was at the United Way. She actually gave the city the application that they used at the United Way to apply for these monies, and gave us a kind of a way to measure organizations and such. But I'd have to say that over the past 8-9 years, it's really been whittled down to the few that you see here, and mostly it centers on your basic needs of food, shelter, and such, being safe. But yeah, I mean, there's always rooms to address anyone new. We've had a couple new ones come along. The New American Africans, was one that did come along a couple, 3-4 years ago. But not a lot of changes have been. But if somebody wants to apply, they're always welcome to apply. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
That was actually my question is, were there any groups that applied this year that aren't represented here?
Family Promise was one of those organizations that were new.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. I just want to note also, Councilor Grady Sexton also wanted people to recognize that the Crisis Center in Central New Hampshire, she has a conflict just like I do, and Councilor Grenovic. Any other questions on general overhead? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Manager, we are moving on to public safety, I believe.
Okay, so in the public safety section, you want to be on page 93 for the police department. And that would be on item number 5. So if you go back to the Granicus, go to 5, you see police has its own piece. So on page 93, see revenues budget to budget are up $8,400, or 1.2%. And that there's a modest increase in special duty services, cruiser rental fees, and school district payments. And there's decreases in drug forfeiture restitution and other revenues. So, and those decreases are $5,000 in restitution and $6,500 in revenues. And other revenues, I should say. Expenses budget to budget are up $797,400 or 6.2%. The main drivers are increases in wages and benefits associated with the collective bargaining agreements that we undertook, and the additional wage scale change that you made to be able to attract more police officers for the market adjustment for the CPPA, the Police Patrolmen's Association. Health insurance costs, remember, we recall, went up 3.25%. And lastly, you recall in January, we adopted a new position for a deputy chief position in the police department. That is now budgeted for going forward. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who has questions regarding the police department budget? Councilor Chapman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Obviously, you referenced the changes that we've made to try to be more successful in recruiting new officers, Mr. City Manager. Do you have a level of confidence that, and I know that we don't have a crystal ball, but we have a level of confidence that the renegotiated wage salaries and the other changes that we've made will help us in this area, because I know that it's been a goal of ours in all 6+ years that I've been on city council to try to be more successful in recruiting and retaining officers. Thank you.
So yeah, my answer is yes, but would you like to hear from someone in the police department? I could.
If it's convenient.
Sure.
Brad.
John Thomas. Yeah, Brad's there. Let me go to Brad.
Brad's here. Brad.
So I'll Brian will bring the police chief in.
I think
you're on.
Chief?
Yeah, so yeah, I appreciate the question. I think the morale of the police department is very, very good right now, given the crisis that the community is facing. Very, very positive feedback amongst the staff regarding the contract. I think it was well overdue. It's probably one of the better contracts that I've seen in my 31 years. So very much appreciated. The other thing too, with currently the police department has 12 vacancies for sworn police officers, and we actually have 5 conditional offers that will start the first week of July. So that's good news.
Good news indeed. Thank you, Chief Osgood. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. I have Councilor Todd.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Actually, the chief answered part of my question in terms of the numbers of new officers that we have recruited and so forth. But I guess one other follow-up, and this is also part of the guessing game. Is there any sense that of a difficulty in moving forward with additional new hires or anything else as related to COVID, or is that something that's really not affecting, from your point of view, the number of candidates that would be out there?
Thank you for the question. The number of candidates coming in is coming in steady. We've done a pretty good job with our recruitment effort. We actually changed the way we interview and test, and we've really streamlined our process. So like I said, we have 5 people ready to start. I think it's July 12th, and we probably will have an additional 2 or 3 for that time frame as well. So I think it's just really the effort of our staff has really done well in this recruiting process.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilor Critter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief Osgood, can you speak for a minute with regards to, in the budget here, you're projecting about 500 more calls for service, but are you seeing an uptick in calls for service now, and also the level of service that you might be responding to because of COVID-19? That would be appreciated.
Yes, thank you for the question. The numbers that we put in there for calls to service were probably put in pre COVID-19. During this state of emergency, our calls for service have generally trended downward about 40%. However, they are starting to pick back up. We're still trending probably about 35% down. And we expect, as we come into our busy season, that the calls for service will continue to rise. We may not hit that full number through the course of the year because of this 2-month gap, but we expect calls for service to increase.
Okay, Councilor Happen.
Thank you. I had a question about on page 93 on the revenue from parking penalties. It looks like we've recognized that 2020 estimated will be down, but then for 2021, it looks like we are using the same estimate for budget as 2020. I was wondering if either the chief or the manager could speak to what went into that or what thinking is behind that.
Want me to take that, Tom? So again, those numbers were put in and prior to COVID-19, we did revisit them as far as the revenues not too long ago. We do think that those numbers will be accurate once we get into FY21. The 100,000 is typically what we're seeing. We also had a reduction in staff, but we filled those positions and still have one more to fill. But so we believe we can hit that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for the chief or the manager? Council Pierce.
Yes, for the chief or the manager. What is the balance of the uncollected parking penalties right now? Do we have a handle on that?
Yeah, Brad Osgood. I think that the best person to ask that question would probably be David Florence on the night of the parking fund budget.
Yeah, I think I was just going to suggest a lot of those questions regarding parking, we probably can take up best during that parking fund discussion, which will be later on.
Okay, thank you.
I just had one quick question. I always go back at the back of the Appendix B to look at program change requests. And I did notice that the department requested and the manager, you chose not to fund the SRO at the Runland Middle School. And I just want to make sure that we publicly confirm that it wasn't the choice you to not fund it. It was the school board chose not to move forward with that position. Is that correct?
That's correct. I had planned going into this, putting together this budget to fund that position and was prepared to fund that. And as was the request from the chief of police, but the school district, and we clarified it with them. They were not prepared to go forward with that position.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions regarding police? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to fire.
Okay, so you want to go on to the agenda item number 6 on your agenda. And you want to be on page 101. Here, revenues budget to budget are up $28,000 or less than 1%. And this includes an increase of $46,600 for ambulance charges, a decrease of $40,600 in FEMA funds. This was a supplemental reimbursement in fiscal year 20. So this is services that were provided in reimbursement. So we don't know if we'll get that this coming year, so you don't budget for it. $1,000 increase in other government agencies. This is from the compact revenue from other agencies. So council will recall that about 2/3 of the costs associated with the dispatch center is paid for by other communities, because we're just one of a couple dozen communities to all of that. And a small increase in other lines. Expenses budget to budget are down $70,000 or less than 1%, and does not include funding for the IAFF. So the firefighters contract, which you just approved, will transfer those funds to this department at the end of the budget process as part of the adopted budget. So you'll see those, the other part of the budget, but it's still going to be going really from one place to another. That's why that number is down and not up this year. But it will be by the time you approve the budget. Also included in this budget are $1,000 for boat equipment and repairs, $2,000 for the AED program, and $1,500 for wireless devices. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Who has questions regarding the fire department budget?
I have a question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Council Pierce.
Has the Concord Fire Department adopted the FirstNet program?
I'll bring on the chief to answer that question.
Thank you.
Chief Newberry, you're in. need to unmute. There he goes.
You have me now?
Got you, Guy. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. We did, we had FirstNet come in and do a presentation. We did it in conjunction with the dispatch center, and we evaluated that actually with any Rouse involved as well. And we had just started that prior to COVID, but at this point, we have not transitioned over to FirstNet.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of that.
The short answer is no, that we have not transitioned to FirstNet. We're in the process of evaluating that when COVID came along.
Thank you.
Council Fennessy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question, and I'm not sure who's best to field this one, but in looking at this budget, does it build in the expenses related to the additional PPE that we're going to expect to need to use throughout this fiscal year? And also, does it build in the expenses related to the ambulance that we were specially outfitting?
Oh, no, we did not build additional funds in. Right now, we're tracking that all through the different grant programs. We have been awarded a couple of different grants now from the Department of Justice and one of the FEMA grants, and that's what we're hoping to continue to rely on that, as well as using resources through the state.
So what we would do is, because a lot of those, Councilor, would fall into fiscal year 20's budget, they'll fall under what you've already approved. And if we have to do a supplemental appropriation based on grant revenues and expenses, we'd do that and bring that to you before we close the books for fiscal year 20. And also, if there's additional dollars comes in due to those additional expenses, we'd do a supplemental budget for fiscal year 21. But to anticipate what those would be now and whether or not those resources are going to go forward is another question. One of the biggest concerns all the communities in the state have is once the money starts to run out that's coming down from the federal government, what happens then? And because a lot of these grant programs have specific deadlines, and a lot of them don't go on into much further into next fiscal year. They usually end in September or sometime near the end of the calendar year.
Quick follow-up. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with my question. My understanding is that a lot of these grants and perhaps any federal funding are going to expire by the end of the year. Do we have a sense, presuming that we're going to have this issue continuing in the second half of our fiscal year, what those costs are going to be like and how we're going to be able to pay for?
In the conversations that the mayor and I have had with the governor, it looks like they're trying to hold back a large section of money because they realize there's going to be additional costs. So this is could play out over a long period of time. But we have not seen anything yet that said these dollars will be made available at a subsequent time frame. But I think that's something we're anticipating. If not, we're just going to have to handle the costs associated with whatever that is reasonable to do to keep our employees safe and the public safe. Did I capture that, Mr. Mayor, correctly?
I do believe you did. Okay. Anyone else? Council Chamberlain.
Your Honor, following up on Councilor Fennessy's excellent question, have there been any indications at the state level that there might be that the state might consider creating a stockpile of PPE in the event of either this pandemic, reigniting in the fall, or another pandemic coming around the corner? I mean, a stockpile that local municipalities could resource.
I have not heard that, but I'd ask Chief Newberry if he's heard that.
That was a discussion that we had on a phone call with Senator Shaheen earlier in the week, whether it be a national stockpile, but I know that was addressed by a couple of the fire chiefs and a concern that some of this money that's coming out now would be in fact utilized for that. and to have a rotating stock in conjunction with the hospital so that the stock didn't sit for years and then find problems with it like we found this time. So it is being thought of and discussed early on now.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anyone else? Fire? I'll just add one thing. It's a pretty difficult time to talk about additions to the budgets, but I do think there's just a growing need to really start talking about a new ambulance at some point. I look at the calls that we're having and the overall impact from the hospital and such. It's we're not the same old department we used to be, and it's something we're not going to be able to avoid for much longer. So just putting that out there. We're not suggesting I understand what's going on right now, but just want to put that on the record. Okay, so seeing no more questions around fire, we can move on to general services.
So, honor members of the council, you'll want to go to agenda item number 7. And you want to be on page 104. So revenues, budget to budget, are up $37,400 or 4.2%. And this is due mainly to transfers in from other funds to cover the administrative costs of those other funds. Expenses budget to budget are up $222,000 or 2.3%. And that's mainly related to wages and benefits for all the employees throughout the General Services Department. Outside services are down $69,900 due to supplemental resolution that was approved by City Council in fiscal year 20 to remove trees in conjunction with the State of New Hampshire project along I-93. Remember, that was $60,000 of that total amount. And there's a reduction, that was a one-time, and a reduction of $12,400 for conferences and seminars. Supplies are up $28,000, which includes an increase of $45,900 for additional auto parts, and other budgetary items were reduced as part of this. That's why the net is $28,000, but there is $45,000, $46,000 for additional auto parts. You'll notice also included in the general services are 2 sections the City Council has added over the years, and those are on page 105. The first section is for the downtown services to show the costs associated with the services program the downtown receives. Fiscal year 21 budget to budget increases $26,400, and this is due to wage increases as a result of the ratification of the collective bargaining agreements. The second supplemental report is for snow and ice control. Expenses budget to budget are up $13,400. This increase is due again to wages and benefit increases as a result of collective bargaining agreements. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Who has questions regarding general services? Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will fill out a sheet, Mr. City Manager. I am interested in learning what the budgetary difference is with regards to spring leaf pickup and fall leaf pickup, given that we have multiple crews that are out and there is a lot of manpower hours that go into that. So I'll be looking for that information. Don't need an answer now, but I'll give your team time to look it up for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure. General services.
They're that good.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm sorry. Okay.
Councilor Hatfield.
Mayor, I did have one question.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay, I was a little slow. Would, under snow and ice control, so page 105, would salt be under supplies?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm going to follow up also with a request to get a breakout under supplies, just to get a little more granular on that. Thank you.
No pun intended.
And just so for the, if I could, Mr. Mayor, just for the rest of the council, the new councils understand, when we get these requests that come in, we will provide that information to that council. We also provide it to all the councilors so they all get the same information.
Anyone else? Okay. If I believe I have it correctly, but that concludes our agenda for tonight. On my agenda, there we go. Did anybody else have any other business for tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I had one question. One thing on our agenda was meeting minutes, and would we be doing those later? I'm assuming minutes aren't ready because we just met. So could you just talk about the process we should expect for that?
Ms. Manager, you want to go?
Well, just the first two items on your next agenda, which would be the 28th, will be the meeting minutes of the 18th and tonight, the 21st, to review and act on those. So you'll be getting those shortly, both of those. And you'll be voting on them at your next meeting.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of the extra work that all the staff is having to do, particularly under these circumstances. So thank you.
I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Councilor Rice-Hawkins.
Thank you. The decision by a couple of other councilors to request the budget paperwork reminded me, I have asked the city clerk to put together information on the number of absentee ballot requests and returns we've had in the past years and the number of election staff and time it's taken to fulfill those. So following up on that conversation, I'll put that through this formal request as well, so we can have that as part of the budget documentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, we're still here. Okay, I'll just remind everybody, Monday, we will not be meeting on the 25th, but we will be meeting again on May 28th, which is next Thursday, a week from today. At that meeting, we'll talk about community development. We're going to talk about the library, parks and recreation, human services, and we also have scheduled the CIP program, TIF districts, and capital. So that is the agenda for next Thursday. If you do have questions, I encourage you to get those questions into the manager as soon as you can, so that we can get those answers back. And it's always appreciative when you put them in writing, so that we can all get them. That's great. I have nothing else for the good of the group, unless somebody else does. Mr. Manager, do you have anything left?
No, sir.
Okay, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by everyone. And Mr. Manager, can you call the roll, please?
I'll get that. Councilor Champlin.
Yes.
To do it right, yeah. Councilor Fennessy.
Yes.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
Yes.
Councilor Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilor Keach.
Yes.
Councilor Kennison.
Yes.
Councilor Kretovic.
Yes.
Councilor Mattson.
Yes.
Councilor Nyan.
Yes.
Councilor Pierce.
Yes.
Councilor Rice-Hawkins.
Yes.
Councilor Todd.
Yes.
Councilor Werner.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bouchard.
Yes.
Mayor Boulay.
Yes.
It is unanimous.
All right, we stand adjourned. Have a wonderful weekend, and be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, too.
Good night.
Good night, folks.